Morning, everyone. You've recovered from tea. That's very good. I just wanted to tell you about the importance of data before I get to our panelists here. This morning, our learned MC had all the data she needed except for one silly little point there. She saw she had the car, and it was full of petrol, and the indicators worked, and she knew where she was going. She had a GPS, and all the lights worked properly. Just one piece of information that didn't get to her was that there was this major hold-up on the highway and she didn't arrive here. So that is the importance of data to us there, and I've got our panelists to talk about those today. We've got some questions that are coming this way. But really, I just think we need to get to a level of excellence in data. And I saw this thing this morning. It said, excellence is not a destination, but a continuous journey. And I think if you can take it that way as well, and saying if you start somewhere and move from there onwards, even if you've got to start, and then there's a journey forward. So let's, with no further ado, I'll introduce my panel members who are on this page here. First of all, on the far left-hand side, I've got Meryl Isherwood from SARS. So she's a person you all love to hate, but she's a lovely girl, so I know her. It's not her fault that she works for SARS, but no, she's a wonderful lady, knows a lot about travel and has done a lot of good work, and I'm hoping we find out about her, how she uses that data. Moving across from there, I've got Margarita Santos from Massmart, who's new on the scene there, so welcome, it's nice to have you there. You know, Felicity knew that you could do all the work there, so that's why she could move off to America. Well done there. And we've got on my right-hand side, I've got Nikki Fonzari, who's from Cummins, who are engines and those type of things. Yeah. So that's the three wise people across here. I'm just here for my looks, and I am 100. Today, when I look at data, it was always it was my entry point to travel. Is that somebody said, you're in procurement, and I thought, what should I look at? And I looked at the car hire companies, and I said, well, let's see what this means. And I didn't understand it, and I got a little spreadsheet together. Eventually, I worked out, they were saying, well, why do we pay for 120 kilometers when the average distance ever traveled is 90? I said, well, that's what somebody said. And I don't know who somebody was, but somebody said we'd put it in the contract. I thought, well, that's easy. Well, why can't we change it to 90? They said, you might drive more than 90. I said, well, look, if we do, we'll change the contract. That was quite easy, and we saved a lot of money by doing that. It was only from the data that we had that we could actually move from there. So I'm saying now, there's two distinct types of data, and I'll ask our panelists to talk about it. There's the financial data that you have to balance. Now, I was an accountant at one stage there, and I didn't use my personality as a contraceptive. But that's where accountants are. They have to balance to the last cent. Now, that is one thing there, and we agree that we need to get that, and it doesn't really matter when the data comes through. You get it, you balance it, you tick it. And if it doesn't balance, you check. What we're talking about, the other one, is when you get data that you need today to say, hold it, there was an accident on the highway, and I should go a different way, or I should get my apologies through. That's the data that's important. Or the one that says, my fuel tank is empty. I'm not going anywhere. Or the speedometer that says if it's not there, there's a good chance that you might get a traffic fine, like I did. But I had a speedometer, but it was probably too far away and recently. So that's where I was yesterday at the post office getting a fine. Because I can be fast even at my age as a baby boomer or whatever it was. There's too many other words around there. So really we're looking and saying that data, if you can take that data and do things with it immediately, you can make a hell of a lot of difference to your company. So if you take that data and you actually try and get it into the right space there, look at it and say, is it meaningful? As in the car, do I need to look at the axle every day? No, not at all. But do I need to look at those key factors out there? Yes, I do. So without that, I'm going to start talking to, maybe ask Meryl to give me some view on data, the most critical element of a travel management program.
Thanks. Morning, everybody. For me, really, and it really also depends on what each individual travel manager, or the person who is looking after the travel portfolio in a company, what they need to get out of their data. For me, people joke, or they think I'm joking when I say to them, I actually don't need to walk into the travel office once in a month. When I'm looking at my data tells me everything that is happening in the travel office. So us as travel managers need to determine what it is that we actually need to be able to extract from that data, what is going to be meaningful to us, and how we extract that data is going to determine whether or not our senior executives are actually happy with what's happening in the travel office. That data is a manifestation of every single thing that your travel manager, your account manager, and your consultants are doing. In terms of supply management, I can manage my entire supplier base, and there's over, at the moment, 1,600 suppliers, just from my data. They tells me whether the correct rates are being utilized, being charged. It tells me whether that suppliers are being used on the rotational basis the way that they need to be. It tells me whether the suppliers have actually invoiced our TMC, whether the TMC has actually paid the suppliers. That's just one aspect of it. But really the data has to be able to show my senior management that we are actually controlling travel within the organization. And really, as a travel manager, your data is key. Without that, you actually cannot perform your function properly.
So, Meryl, where did you get your BSc from? Did you you built this up there in your own little database, and there,
Yeah.
Was it difficult? Was it to get that, or was it just common sense?
It was difficult in the beginning because it's, again, trial and error. What actually, also from what I knew I needed, trying to explain to the TMC why I require that information, and the fact that that information is in the system. So whatever information is in your system, whichever system you're using, whether it's GDS and whatever your back office system is, that information is in the system because the consultants are putting it in, your finance team are putting in all your financial data. And what needs to be extracted from those various systems into one format, however you do that, so irrespective of what system you use to actually extract that data, or whether it's putting together manual Excel sheets, that is what needs to be done. And I think really just important for the TMCs to understand that when we ask for data in a specific format, okay, there's a reason why. It's not always just because we're wanting it to look pretty. Pretty's got nothing to do with it. I think most people that are working with data, what is in the information that is provided is far more critical than what it looks like. So the pretty dashboards and everything look very pretty, but they actually mean they really are not important to us. It's the information that is actually being shown in those dashboards that is far more meaningful to us.
Meryl, do you have warning signs that pop up and say, this looks wrong?
At the moment, no. It's one of the things we are working on together with our current TMC. That information is extremely important, is how it's said, is to be able to straight away alert you if something is wrong. It's little things. If all of a sudden you're getting complaints about one particular supplier, it alerts you straight away before it becomes a major issue that you as the travel manager can then attend to it. Could be anything. One about we're very strict in terms of car rental. In the SARS we use Group E's. Okay, it's only there are only 2 exceptions in the company, and there we have Treasury approval to do that. But everybody else gets a Group E. The car rental companies may not upgrade our travellers. So even if there are no cars available, they may not upgrade them to more than 1 car group higher, because otherwise they're being given, so it shows they're being, or could be being given preferential treatment. And that kind of thing, if I automatically now, it's daily, if I can extract that data on a daily basis and actually see all of a sudden everybody's being given Group Ds or Group Es, straight away I need to attend to that, because we have quite strict SLAs in place with our car rental companies. And that kind of non-compliance on their part, the quicker I can address it, the quicker we can fix it. So, yeah, critical.
No, thanks, Meryl. Can we move across and maybe Marco can give us a bit of a view on what is that critical data? What is that stuff there that we need?
I mean, morning everybody. I definitely agree with Meryl that data is probably one of the most key and critical pieces for any travel management role, and we've seen it evolved in such a dynamic way that we are now having to actually look at our travel program from a more proactive approach than rather, attending a reactive sort of approach to travel and dealing with issues after the fact. And so real-time data right now is so critical, and things like having a very useful dashboard that can alert you to things like policy compliance or traveler risk, and ensuring that you don't have 4 executives traveling on one flight, for instance, that enables you to actually address these sort of issues before they even happen. So it's quite critical for us, and there's a lot of pressure, not just from a South African perspective, but if you look at any of the global travel trend analysis and forecasts that any of the major role players have released, it all pinpoints back to a few key items that include traveler safety and, more importantly, traveler data or travel data as such. And it really, it does boil down to looking at data intelligence and seeing, like Meryl mentioned, what information can you extract and what value do you need as the business to get out of that and align your strategy in travel. So Massmart, as an example, has the ethos of everyday low cost. We in a retail environment, so it's quite critical, and even from Walmart, with the motto being, saving or keeping costs down so that we can enable people to live better, is very important. So we need to have the data upfront so we can address issues as and when they happen, and really have real-time data that's dynamic and user-friendly and that we can access at any point. And I don't know if we're there yet. I think there's some technology platforms that have certainly managed to get it right, but I think there's a lot that still needs to be done in order for us to have that information at hand.
I want to throw cat amongst the pigeons now, because we all get this wonderful data and we say we all flew low-cost carriers and it was brilliant, and not taking low-cost carriers out of the picture. But when you start putting the total, I've put my procurement hat on and say, as the total cost of that travel, what was that? You start saying, well, your executive, who is probably earning, say, R1 million, and the actual cost of his hour is never factored into anything, his or her hour, because we have both genders in executive. And we start saying, well, hold it, we saved 500 Rand on our green flight, but they stayed at the airport for 6 hours, and at an average of 2,000 Rand an hour, we're talking a 12,000 Rand loss to the company. And we have to start looking at more than just that travel cost. We need to look at the total integrated cost of when they left home to the time they got back again, and whether the trip was successful as well. That's where we're taking data to the next level. Just reconciling it, you can take a whole load of monkeys and over and over and over, they'll do it in the end. I'm not saying you're monkeys out here. But you can. They can play the national anthem if you give them enough chance. But that's not what we're talking about here. There's certain data that you need to reconcile, absolutely, and you would do that's the financial side of it. But this is taking data to the next level. Do you have a dashboard that you look at on your desk? Does it show you what's happening?
So we are very lucky through our online technology to have a platform that gives us a snapshot, that gives us an overview of the number of bookings we've got, policy compliance, things like decline savings, and also highlights if we do have travelers on, more than 4 travelers on a particular flight. But I also agree with you, it is the overall cost of transaction, and it's not just, like you say, the price up front, but there's a whole procurement process that takes place, and it only ends when it's actually been transacted and accepted by the cost center owner. So even the cost of doing business with a particular supplier, when it comes to the financial side of it, what is it costing to reconcile and process that invoice and the statement and the efficiencies, like you mentioned, it's not just the upfront ticket cost. But certainly it's very useful to have a snapshot dashboard that can alert you to those sort of upfront issues that are quite high level and important in our space.
So that's quite interesting. We've got two from Meryl and from myself, different views, but you both needed some type of dashboard thing to actually say, this is how we're working. Back to the car again. Have we got petrol? Is the car working? Maybe Nicole, if you can talk to us.
Good morning, everybody. One thing for me, I think, which is so critical is the consolidation of the data. I'm really battling with that from a corporate perspective. in that we've got obviously your credit card spend. I look after the credit card and the expenses as well within the Cummins environment. So you've got your credit card spend and you've got your travel spend. And, for example, supplementary costs. There's not one place where I can go, one space that I can go to pool all the data for travel at the moment. And I think that is one of our biggest challenges. And you mentioned savings as well. I think the savings is so critical to a company, but we're also not tracking those savings properly in the sense of how you're tracking them against, let's say, published fares. A lot of the TMCs, and I come from the TMC environment, so I think how we're tracking our savings is also based on published fares and not necessarily another, let's call it a mid-range airfare or the best fare of the day, for example. And that's a big challenge for us because the reality of the savings that the TMCs are showing at the moment isn't really reality. And that's quite critical for us.
I think you need to show the professionalism of the travel industry and of travel management, because people just say, oh, travel, what can we do there? But you can do so much more if you give the right data out of there. You can say, look, this is the savings we're making, this is adherence, this is what you're doing. You're flying people to a region every week. Why don't you have a regional officer down there? Oh, well, that's a change of strategy. We don't need to fly people all the time. We should have an office there. Now you get involved in the strategy of the organization as well. You probably understand why people are flying or why people are traveling, what's it all about. It's more than just a commodity. It's something that you can actually make a difference with. But if you get that data and you start taking it up a level, and I don't know if you, I'm going to ask you a question there, but I'm looking and saying, well, do you actually recommend where people go to? Do you actually say, well, look, that hotel or that flight or that car is really, really good because of X, Y, and Z? You're the professionals. Do you actually use that information to say, these are the best on-time flights we ever had, and it will be worthwhile to you? This is the best performance we've had from hotels, and this is the feedback we're getting from other people, that you get things thrown in or the service is just good. I can go to 2 hotels, and I'm not mentioning this hotel, and you get completely different service, and it's to do with the front desk manager. One who says, make the customer feel king as you walk in, and even recognize it. One time, a hotel that has changed hands a few times used to have a little Nedbank flag, and people felt like home. It was nothing. It cost them R1 to put in a little flag. But as the people came in, they said, well, I'm liked here. They go back again, so it is really fantastic. So really, I'm saying that you can book trips faster, you can get to the right hotel, you can look at passengers' requirements, all coming from the data. Do you take your data that step further there, Meryl, to sort of like give advice to your travellers?
Absolutely. Also, just to go back to your previous point, Howard, our data as well is not just for my pleasure, if I can put it that way. The data also goes through to our procurement team, and it goes through to ExCo, it goes through to all of the cost centre managers. And I've embarked on quite a stringent education program with the cost centre managers so that they actually understand the data for their divisions and how to manage the travel individually. Because we're such a large organisation and spread across the country, it's really difficult for me to reach across the country. And I need the cost centre managers to be able to manage. They're the ones signing off those trips in the first place. So they need to understand, A, what they're signing off. Again, in terms of the value proposition, is the cheapest always better, depending on the business reason for travel. Procurement uses that data as well. From that reason, because our back office system for the requests is SAP. So the SAP reason for travel that we use in our data, procurement actually dissect that information to assist in their procurement program. So for example, training. Where before we used to have trainers that used to be based in Pretoria, and everybody used to travel through to the training centres to attend the training. With the data from the last 2 years, we've now, together with procurement and with our SARS Institute of Learning, we've actually implemented a completely different strategy where the trainers now actually go out to the regions and do the training there. And that has saved us almost 72% on the travel costs for training in the last year. Now that's phenomenal. And that is the importance of the data and the difference that it can make in an organisation. Just in terms of the supplier management, absolutely. We've got quite a comprehensive preferred domestic hotel program, And our hotels are, so say for example in Cape Town, we have 5 preferred properties in Cape Town. We try and consolidate our spend as much as we can. Obviously there are certain time periods in the year where we are required to use other properties. So we have a primary preferred program and a secondary preferred, that the consultants know they can book those secondary properties if the primary ones aren't available. But the travellers have a choice. So in Cape Town, for example, if they choose supplier A, I can then immediately from the data see why is the higher portion of our travellers, why are the higher portion of our travellers staying at one particular property? What are they doing differently to the others? They're all equal standard properties. What is causing their personal preference for their particular property? Same with the car rental. We try our best to ensure that it's done on a rotational basis. We use 3 suppliers currently, but travellers do have a choice. If they prefer to travel with supplier A, again, important for me to understand the reasons why and to then feed that information back to the suppliers. So really my data for the supplier management is absolutely critical. I cannot manage the suppliers, so obviously together with our TMC, without that information available to me.
You do that real time, though, that you're looking almost on a daily basis.
Well, this is the challenge. Is currently I'm receiving the data on a monthly basis, but we are working. One of our goals is to be able to extract that data in the format that is required almost daily if I need to. That is real-time data. I do have access to it daily, but it's I must be honest, we have had a couple of challenges, but we're working together on it to get it to the level that we want it.
Yeah, I can tell you from a medical point of view there, with medical aid that I'm the chairman of, we have a thing called IBNR, which is incurred but not receipted or not received yet. And that is information that's going to come through. You go into hospital and they say it's going to be about 100,000 for that procedure. It only probably gets through in 2-3 weeks' time. Ideally, you want to know about that straight away. Is it going to be perfect? Nope. Are we going to try and balance it? Nope. It will be in the end, but it gives you direction so that you understand where you're going to be at the end of that month, where you're going to be at the end of 2-3 months' time. And with travel data, you can have that as well. It doesn't have to be 100% fit. If it could be an 80%, you can see this is the general trend. I would still get your TMC to give you the proper information, and we'll probably talk now about late information, but we're saying you can make changes there. I'll be talking about car rental. We have 2 companies, and there's a choice of the traveller of who they could choose. I usually put colours onto them, so there was a green company and a red company. No yellow company or any of the other purples or whatever, but let's call them green and red to make it easier to understand. And for a long time, it was, I could see that it was 40-60 from green to red. All of a sudden, it changed, and I said, what happened there? And I think there was, the service started going up, and it went to 50-50. It went to 60-40 the other way around. And every time I had a conversation with the green and red companies, I said, what are you doing differently? And it was good, because it was a strategic talk of there, because the prices were about the same. Eventually, when I retired, all of a sudden something happened, and I think I know it is that one of the companies brought in a new car that everybody hated. And you could see all of a sudden it went from 60% of the market share to 40%. I said it was your car, and you could see it coming through. And I won't say what car, because I'll probably offend somebody across here, but it was that. And I drove that same car. I said, well, I'll take it for a drive. Well, I couldn't keep it on the road. It was one of these things here. And because the speedometer and all those on the left-hand side, or in the middle of the dash, so that may give people trying to drive and looking across. I'm surprised we didn't have more crashes. But people voted with their feet and moved across. Now, if I'd known that sooner, I would have said, please make sure that our travellers don't get that car. Make sure you don't get that, otherwise you're going to lose market share. But it's no good at the end of a month or 2 months and then you say it's gone, because people won't go back. And it would have been great to have good supplier relationship. Now, being head of procurement, that's one of those things. You want to have strategic sourcing, strategic supplier relationships. And that's where you need to be as well, with your data saying, this is what's happening, this is what we need to do. You can even get to the stage and saying, that flight time is just not suitable for us. Or we would like to have a flight to Bloemfontein because we know the industry want to fly to Bloem, and this is the time. And I'm starting seeing suppliers changing their times and saying, hey, most people want to go at that time in the morning and come back at that time. So we as an industry can actually change their flight schedules if you've got that data, and you can do it over there. Anyway, well, let's move on, Marco, and talk about enriching data and using that.
Yeah, I certainly think, looking at enhanced data and enriched data is very critical for us. In Massmart, we're quite lucky at the moment. The thing is, to be honest, we probably haven't got our data where we want it to be, if I'm completely honest. Consolidation, like Nicole mentioned earlier, is definitely a very difficult task at hand, and to get that right. But we're lucky in the sense that going forward, we can leverage off Walmart globally, who's actually looking at standardized data and the formats and reporting tools that we can use on a global level that is dynamic, that we can have real-time data access, and like you say, preempt upfront data. So it's really, really critical, but also looking at other technology platforms that enable us to have a consolidated point of data. And an example is, for instance, the virtual card solutions that we looked at this morning. And that is actual transaction data and actual costs that hit us. And some of them really do offer really brilliant data capabilities where you can pull reporting up until transactions that happened yesterday. So it really is to understand what exactly you need in the data, and it's going back to what Meryl mentioned right at the beginning, is to understand the value that you need in it and how you can actually slice and dice and be dynamic about the way that you manage travel, preempt any risks potentially to the business. And it also brings in an element of data security as well, which I think is quite critical. So I do think it's very, very essential that you have that sort of data, enriched data, and I don't know if we're there yet, certainly not in the Massmart space, but we're getting there, and we're partnering with our partners to ensure that we get to that point.
Yeah, I think that you are all experts out there because you have a thing called intuition. You know what's going on. You're linked to travel. You understand it. Now, the financial people don't understand that. Sometimes even your travelers don't understand it. But you are the experts, and you should be taking that data and saying, well, hold it, this is what I can do with it. This is, do I need all this? Because often we get bombarded with information. And we're saying, if it fitted into these rules and regulations, we should just accept it. That's fine. The ones that are outside of those parameters, those are the ones we should investigate. And it gives you the extra time to go and see the kids swimming or whatever like that we were talking about earlier. But we spend so much time looking at rubbish. And we had a presentation a few years ago, clear the clutter. And there is a lot of clutter in information that comes through. You've got to say, well, what is important to you and what really isn't? Go back to the financials. Yes, you need to balance. But then you start needing to look at the information that will make a difference in your life and make you look good as well. And make a travel person say, well, look, I can change your strategy because of this, or I can help with your business deals because of that. That's the data you want there. They've got a new term called a data scientist, which sounds quite larny, but it's good. He takes data. I think what he does, he harvests it. He gets that information. I got this from a presentation. I'm sure I can forward it to you. But then he stores the data somewhere. And you don't need too much of it, but you store it, and then you clean it. And that's an important thing, because there is a lot of rubbish on data that you need to actually go through and sort of say, well, that's the data. And here he comes checking the quality, because the people don't fly for 24 hours. I won't tell you that joke later on when we've got plenty of time about that. But people don't fly for 24 hours there. They don't drive for 24 hours, unless they're driving from Pretoria this morning. Then you use your intuition, and then you analyze that data, and you get it into a position that is useful, but then you simplify it. You say, this is the crucial stuff to us here. And then the one thing I don't think we do enough of, we don't understand our users, the people out there. We're too busy doing our jobs, we don't understand those users outside there, which is quite common sense. And then communicate clearly. We don't tell people, because we're in a little glass house there, and we don't... Yeah. I always like that one that said, people in glass houses shouldn't. And that they can take your mind anywhere you want to on that one. Then finally, and you give back to the greater travel industry is what I'm doing today, because I don't have to be here. You can't fire me. I'm here because I want to be here. So it's giving back for sessions like this, coming along and talking and saying, this is what we did well. We're very proud of that. And even if it's a 5-minute on a panel, Anyway, that was the data scientist that is the new catchword who looks after big data. See, I'm not that old. I understand these ones here. But I'll go over to Nikki now, and she'll tell us about what she does with data.
Well, just to actually go into the data scientist thing, I mean, it should actually be relatively simple, right? I mean, if it's inputted, it's output. And it's that's something, you know, you talk about responsibility as well. I think from a TMP perspective, we as travel managers are held highly accountable for the spend and the reporting of that spend to the different leaders within our business. And that's been quite a new and big challenge for me as well, is to be able to report properly on that. And when you talk global and local data, that's also a challenge, is because they differ at times. I'm definitely going to have a side chat with you on what you do from a global level, but your global data and your local data is not the same at times, and that's also one of those challenges. But for me, in my role, obviously quite new, it's the first time I'm going through the proper RFPs for the 2016 period coming up. And the data is so critical to that, to be able to supply information to the big global world out there and the RFPs on where we're going into Africa or what we're doing in South Africa and our car hire spend and that 90 kilometers versus 100 kilometers. So the RFPs for me and the data that we're getting from the TMC is absolutely critical. And the formats, you know, it's for me, just give me a really good Excel sheet. I'm quite happy with that. It doesn't need to be a fancy dashboard even. As long as I've got my Excel sheet that gives me the columns that I'm requiring to pull the data from, it's fine. And also I think there needs to be a little bit, maybe more flexibility on advising or letting your partner and your teams know what you want. And instead of saying, well, we can give you these 6 reports, if you want the 7th report, you're going to pay for it. Or rather only give me 4 of the ones I want and keep the rest. So there's that challenge as well, to be able to better partner with your TMC and be able to have that open, honest conversation about what your requirements are.
Yeah, we're getting nowadays to the stage where you say, I take the reports as read. It means it's boring. We really want to be in the position where we say, hey, that we've read, but these are the ones that are really interesting, and these are facts that will make a difference to us and the TMCs and suppliers. We need to do that and get that further on. Now here comes a difficult question, which I'll put to Meryl, of course, is what is the cost of late data to you? What does it do to your reporting, to everything you stand for in SARS?
For me, late data is embarrassing. At the end of the day, when we have very specific deadlines that we need to meet for the reporting for EXCO and the Commissioner. If I don't have the data in time, it reflects, and we know there are lots of people involved in making that process happen, but I'm the one that sits with egg on my face. If the data is received late and there's no time to actually check it, and all those, to see a one night stay and that rate is showing as 2,400 Rand a night at a garden court, for example, there is no time to actually check to see why it's reflecting like that, so the data then gets presented, which for me is incredibly embarrassing, because the Commissioner actually presents the travel data at EXCO, and for me to provide him with information that I know is not accurate, I'd rather not do. So each time that there is an incident like that, it reflects only on me. And it really, it's also something that we understand it in the travel industry, which is also something that a lot of finance people don't understand in organizations, is in travel, we close off at the end of a month, at the actual end of the month. Where in finance, normally they close off on the 25th or the 26th of a month. So by the 30th, they have all their other information. For travel, we're always a week or so behind. So already that's something for them to try and wrap their heads around. But then if the data comes through later and there is no time to actually check it, it really does cause a lot of major issues. And really, again, as Marco was saying, being reactive instead of proactive. Even if the data isn't in the format that is required, the fact that we actually have access to it real time makes all the difference. I can't emphasize it enough. And it's something I was just thinking, it's also something how when we talk about, I think it's difficult because what we're talking about, we know in our minds what we need and why we need it. But I think, and it's maybe something that we need to look at another session, is actually putting, obviously not with our actual travel data, but we can put in dummy data, but with specific columns to actually show what it is that various companies require, so that it's something actually tangible that you can look at and see that will possibly make more sense than us talking about something that's abstract. And really trying to get into our headspace in terms of, it's exactly that, is the analysis. Is travel managers are becoming almost more data analysts than travel managers, because their data is what everything revolves around. And really from the TMC space to say, and when I was in the TMC space, it was also something that for me was really important, is to be able to actually explain the data to the person that I was presenting that information to or doing the reviews with, not just dropping off a report and going, well, there the stats are. It doesn't mean anything to them. They don't understand it. As finance people, they understand the figures, but they don't understand what actually goes into making up those figures and what is actually showing them. And that is where the reliance does fall on the TMC, because that expectation from the corporates, the businesses, is that you are the experts. You're going to be able to explain that information to them. It shouldn't just all fall on the travel manager. As the TMCs in the TMC space, the account managers, finance managers, you need to understand their data and what we're talking about as to what we can extract from that one particular stat that's showing.
So Mary, you say it's a
very
partnership
passionate
of the TMC, the customer and the suppliers, a partnership working for the benefit of all of them.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, if that's the data the better the data is presented to our leaders, the better it reflects on you. Yes, obviously it reflects well on the travel manager, but believe me, there's not a travel manager that I know out there, or anybody that looks after the travel portfolio, that won't give credit to the TMC where it's due. We make it very clear with our partners, with our management teams. It's a tripartite alliance. It's the suppliers, it's the TMC, and it's us as an organisation. Nobody works in total isolation. We have to work together. So when we look good, we all look good together. If we look bad, we all look bad together. So really important to listen to your corporates, listen to understand what they need, to understand what they need and why they need it in that particular way, or why they need that particular information.
Thank you. Mark, can you give us a bit on late data? What is the impact on you and what are you doing about it?
Sure. I completely agree. It is, we have very strict deadlines. We have reporting to give to the business leaders. And the harsh reality is, unfortunately, for travel managers, that as much as we want to also have all of these dynamic data analysis, at the end of the day, our leaders are really concerned with the cost implications of the travel program overall. And so if I present a report late, it also pulls into question the credibility of the data. And I need to be able to stand there hand on heart, knowing that I've had the time to actually look at it properly and that I agree 100%, because there is a lot of manual intervention going into data these days. We still, especially in the travel space, rely heavily on manual intervention. So there's a lot of cleaning, a lot of sifting that needs to go on before I can comfortably present those statistics to the business. So it definitely, like Meryl mentioned, it reflects bad on everybody involved. And certainly people start asking the question, how credible is the supplier or their source of data? How can you trust the supplier and how can we be doing business with them? So it really goes into uncharted waters where there might be nothing completely wrong with it, but just because of a late deadline or producing a report late, it actually does taint the image. And it takes a very long time to build up credibility once you've actually presented one single item of missed data or inaccuracy in your data. It takes a very long time to build the trust of the business to trust you again with that data. So I think it's very, very critical to have.
Thank you. Nicole?
Well, in the Cummins environment, we actually, our travel team falls part of the shared services. So we work on an international sort of billing per department. So the data, time, and when we get it, and the accuracy of it is so critical, because that's how we bill back to our business, to our different cost centers, is based on the data. So the late data and the accuracy of that data, how it is, it's beyond critical. And I am 100% held accountable for that data. So I think it's just understanding the, the time frame and the accuracy for us. It's just actually non-negotiable. It really is.
Excellent. Thank you. We're running into the last bit before we get to questions, but I'm saying, in a perfect world, what would be real time on your desk? What would be the thing that would drive you as a travel manager? That you don't have everything out there, but what is your fuel indicator, your accelerator, your speedo, or maybe your GPS or your radio broadcast saying the traffic is bad in Pretoria? What are those things that are driving you would ideally have, the crystal ball?
The key drivers that we require at SARS is in line with cost containment measures by National Treasury. So it's car rental, checking to see that the correct car rental groups are being booked. My accommodation is under the rate cap that's been set by Treasury. So actually seeing up to yesterday, or even, lifetime, dashboards on those particular areas. So it's our policy non-compliance in terms of advanced booking days for air, car groups, and the hotel rate caps.
Anything on productivity, getting the things through, your TMC actually getting from beginning to the end, how long is that process? Would that be on top of mind?
Yeah. It is. Unfortunately, at this stage, we're busy working on some SAP developments in terms of SL8's turnaround times, because at the moment we can't actually...
This is a perfect world, remember. It's not SARS, it's a perfect world.
In a perfect world, absolutely,
okay.
Yeah. So it's turnaround times, productivity levels, so it's do we have the right number of consultants actually in that office for the number of bookings that we're doing, and that's the number of changes that are coming through. Yeah.
Thank you. Marco? Perfect world.
Yeah, I agree. Things like policy compliance and traveller tracking is quite key. But also, like you say, I think what would really be brilliant is to have and be able to quantify the actual cost of the transaction from start to end, and be able to understand the overall, not just the time efficiencies, but the actual cost of resources, etc. So that would really be brilliant in the ideal world.
Do you get feedback from your travellers? Is it part of the loop? I didn't ask Meryl, but I can ask you, and I'll go back to Meryl. Maybe she can comment just now. Is this thing that we gave as a travel desk and said this is what the company wants? Do we get the thing back saying I actually enjoyed it, or it fit for purpose? Maybe the enjoyment is too much, but fit for purpose, it did what I want, I achieved my business goals. Do you get that type of feedback?
I think, unfortunately, like we've mentioned before, travel is sort of, an entity where if everything goes well, we don't hear about it, but we only hear when it goes wrong. So unfortunately, no, we don't get that sort of feedback all the time. There are instances when people comment on any technology or innovation you've brought in where, they maybe have a positive view on it, but unfortunately on a regular basis, we don't necessarily get that from the business.
Maybe we should be working towards that to say,
Absolutely.
Well, it's not just a product, it's not like a laptop or a cell phone, it's an actual experience as well. Okay, that's great. Nicole?
Well, Hart, honestly, for me, in an ideal world, accuracy is probably more critical than getting it, on a daily basis, to be very honest. If I could get it accurate once a month, it's good. I love the suggestions of the open forums within your company, and I think that's something I'm definitely going to take back to Cummins, because as you say, it's critical to hear from the people that are actually on the ground and traveling, to be able to go and experience and give you feedback. And Cummins is good in the sense that they do allow us to be changeable and to be flexible with our policy if it's obviously for the better of our travellers and our employees. So that suggestion for me is something I'm definitely going to take back to Cummins. I think it's a great suggestion.